Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I will take you through ways on how to handle plot questions in the excerpt in Kcse English Paper 2. In the excerpt, as we said earlier, questions are quite predictable. In many cases, the examiners will expect the candidates to identify and illustrate thematic concerns, issues, or themes, aspects of style, or what we call stylistic devices or literary devices, and at the same time, the character traits of the various characters highlighted in that excerpt. Another glaring question in this section is always the plot question, the question that tests the examiner's knowledge of the text's plot, that is the flow of the story. Can the candidate correctly narrate the story, maybe from the first point where it begins up to the last? In some texts, there is what we call the linear plot, in that the story starts from A, moves to B, and then ends at C. At some points, the plot is not that linear, and to a greater extent, the writers use flashback. In such cases, the story can begin from point C, B, and A, or maybe from point B, A, and C, and so forth. There are ways that the examiners test the candidate's understanding of the plot. And one such way is when the examiner asks, especially this is the first question in most excerpts, the candidate to place the excerpt into its immediate context. So in this way, or in such a situation, the examiner expects the candidate to state what happens immediately before the excerpt that you've been given, and also to state what happens immediately after the given excerpt. So such a question place the excerpt into its immediate context. A candidate will be expected to approach it by giving what happens immediately before, and at the same time giving points on what happens immediately after. So in an event that the marks allotted for this is 4 marks, then it means that 2 marks will be for what happens immediately before, and 2 marks will be for what happens immediately after. Apart from that, this question could also be specific. A candidate can be expected to give what or to explain what happens immediately before. So it could be specific to immediately before, and at the same time, the candidate can also be asked to explain what happens immediately after the excerpt. Another way that this question can be tested, a specific occurrence or an event can be alluded to, can be mentioned or stated in the excerpt, and then the candidate can now be expected to describe that event in details. There could also be an event going on in that given excerpt, and the candidate can also be asked what similar event, apart from the excerpt, what similar event occurs. So a candidate can also be expected to describe and detail an event similar with the one in the excerpt. That is also a plot question. So, looking at our sample excerpt that we've been using, I want us to use it to try and answer some of these plot questions practically. So, if you have a text, I would want to send you to chapter 11 and our excerpt, that is the text Blossoms of the Savannah, our excerpt began from page 145, that is the first paragraph in that page, and it ended in the third paragraph of page 146. So I highly recommend that if you are following this video with me, then you need to have your Blossoms on the Savannah text with you. So before we really delve deep into our discussion for today, allow me to ask those who are new here to kindly hit onto that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that anytime we produce a video like this, YouTube will automatically notify you. Again, to my subscribers, I continue thanking you so much. So this is the first statement or the sentence in the excerpt. Their parents looked tired and aloof when they arrived home. That is on page 145. Page 146, the excerpt ends where it is mentioned but their mother's mood was completely different. Her previous night's taciturnity had turned into loquacity. Now, the one probable question from this excerpt is that the candidate can be expected to describe what happens immediately before the excerpt. And if we look at what goes on before, maybe we can just try to read a bit. When their father later turned up for breakfast, he was edgy and his eyes were shifty. It was only when they told him what had befallen them the previous day that he was shocked back to his senses. He got agitated and angrily gnashed his teeth. He hit the tabletop with his clenched fist, rattling the crockery on it. He shouted in a thunderous, booming voice, saying an assault on his daughters was not only an affront to him personally that he could not tolerate, but a threat to the security of his children and home that he could never ever allow to surface as long as he lived. Getting up suddenly, he briskly walked back to the bedroom. The mother was equally shocked and angered by the depressing news, followed her husband. The girls were left there crestfallen, despondency and downheartedness alternated in their young hearts, wreaking untold havoc in their already troubled lives. So again, as you try to answer this question on what happens immediately after, a candidate should, to some extent, bring about a kind of relationship of what happens in the excerpt to what happens immediately after or immediately before. Like in the excerpt, the girl's parents, Olekaelo and Mama Milanoi, return home despondent, aloof, and tired because their missions have backfired. Then the girls, who had depressing news to share with their parents, now hold it back. Maybe they are sensitive that they are going to add insult to injury, so they hold that news back. And now, after the excerpt, the girls decide to let out the news or to share the depressing news of their ordeal with their parents. Number two, Mama Milanoi has also been advised by her incognito to take the girls to Uncle Simeren's homestead so that they can tutor them, and it will not require Mama Milanoi a lot of effort to convince her girls to get circumcised. So those are things that go on in the excerpt. So if we find anything as a continuation or an answer to these immediately after the excerpt, that will show us what is really going on immediately after that excerpt, because it is a continuation of what goes on in the excerpt. So number one, the first thing that happens after this excerpt is that Olekaelo turns up for breakfast, being edgy and his eyes being shifty. That is the first occurrence after the excerpt. After that, the girls finally get to share, that is Rachel and Tayo. Rachel and Tayo share the depressing news that they had held back from their parents. That is the second thing that happens. Number three is Olekaelo's reaction to that news. And Olekaelo is angered, is agitated, he is chagrined. He then goes to the bedroom, gets his snobkery, and gets his sword, and moves out of the house. Number four, Mama Milanoi now uses this unfortunate incident to finally convince the girls, that is Rachel and Tayo, to be taken to Uncle Simren's homestead. Those are four events, four occurrences that go on immediately after the excerpt. Another way that this question can, the plot question can also be tested. In the excerpt, there has been a mention of the horrific story or the ordeal, this depressing news that the girls get to tell their parents. And it is in the first paragraph, if you look at page 145, where the excerpt begins, and the last sentence in that paragraph, it states, the girls had to keep their horrific story, however urgent, to themselves until their parents had recovered from whatever was troubling them. So, a plot question can come in, it can come in the form that a candidate is being asked, what horrific story is being mentioned or being stated here? So the candidate must really know the plot, must know about the horrific story that has just happened to the girls previously, in the previous chapter, that is chapter 10. And in answering such questions, and that is where we also have the kind of question I talked about earlier in this video, that apart from this excerpt, where else does a similar occurrence occur? So in such a question, the best way to answer it is that there are four things to consider. Number one, who are being talked about, or who are involved, or who are victims in that horrific story or ordeal. Number two, where were they? That is the background information. When this was happening, where were they? Number three, what happened to them? Then number four, what was their reaction? So those are 4 things that if a candidate finds a question like this in a Kcse examination, you should think along those questions. And in trying to answer those questions, you will be answering such a question. Now let us go to this question that we have here. That what is the horrific story that has been mentioned in this excerpt? Who are the victims of this horrific story? It is Rachel and Taia who do not want to share with their parents about this horrific story, and for that matter, they are the victims. Where are they? The girls, their parents, having gone to seek advice, like Olekaelo went to seek advice from Ole Supeo, and at the same time, Mama Wilenoi went to seek advice from her in Kainito. They were then told to go to the shop where Maison would organize for them lunch for the day. So the ordeal or the horrific story takes place when the girls are coming back from their father's Nasela shop. So we have already answered 2 questions. We are talking about Rachel and Taio, and they are coming from the shop. What happened to them? What happened to them is that the 2 vagabonds, that is Lante son of Kanyira and Ntaramuyo, accosted them with an attempt at raping them. And Ntaramuyo and Lante son of Kanyira attempted or tried to rape them. What was the girls' reaction? The girls started scratching the faces of the 2 vagabonds, Ntaramuyo and Lante, using their fingernails. But this one was to no avail because they were overpowered by those 2 strong men who wielded knobkerries. How did this ordeal or horrific story then come to an end? Olarin Koi, out of nowhere, came and rescued the girls by beating up the 2 vagabonds. Now there you are. You have correctly answered the question, the plot question there. That what is the horrific story being mentioned in the excerpt. Remember this. If you are asked such a question, ask yourself, who are the victims being talked about? Number 2, where are they? And that gives the background information. Number 3, what happened to them? Number 4, what was their reaction? Number 5, how did the story end? There for you viewers, that is, those are probable questions that you can be asked in testing your understanding of the plot. Until next time.